Someone twisted a conversation on you recently, and before you could even finish your sentence, you were the one apologizing. You walked away from it feeling small, confused, replaying the whole thing in your head, wondering if maybe you really were the problem. What if I told you that wasn't an accident? What if the exact confusion you felt was the product working as designed? Because everything you were taught about communication, about being fair, about hearing the other side out, was quietly engineered to keep you losing to people who play a much darker game. Today I'm going to show you the pure mechanics of the 3 stages they use. And by the end, you'll never be able to unsee them again. Most men think manipulation looks like a movie villain, someone twirling a mustache, telling you their evil plan, being obvious about it. That's the fantasy. That's the version they let you believe, because believing it keeps you defenseless. Real manipulation is invisible. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives dressed as concern, as logic, as someone who just wants to talk it out. And it moves through 3 distinct stages, each one building on the last. Now, here's where I need to be honest with you. Because I respect your intelligence, this pattern has been floating around online lately with fresh names attached to it. But the mechanism underneath is not new, and it is not a trend. It was documented by Dr. Jennifer Freyd at the University of Oregon back in 1997. She gave it an ugly, precise acronym: DARVO, Deny Attack, Reverse Victim and Offender. We'll come back to that. Because the man who understood this centuries before any psychologist put a name to it didn't study it in a lab. He survived it. Niccolo Machiavelli spent 14 years inside the Florentine government. From 1498 to 1512, he served as secretary to the Second Chancery of the Republic. Over 40 diplomatic missions. He sat across the table from Cesare Borgia, from Pope Julius II, from the King of France. He didn't read about power. He watched it operate at point-blank range. He watched men smile while they betrayed each other. He watched the truth get rewritten in real time by whoever held the most leverage. And then, in September of 1512, the Medici family returned to power. They stripped him of everything. Then his name appeared on a list. Roughly 20 men suspected of conspiring against the new regime. Historians largely agree he wasn't even involved. It didn't matter. Guilt by association made him a target. In February of 1513, they arrested him and threw him into the Bargello prison. And then they gave him the strappado, hands bound behind the back, hoisted into the air by a rope, then dropped 6 times. 6 drops that dislocated his shoulders and left his arms hanging useless. They wanted a confession. He never gave them one. He described his cell as a place that stank like a charnel house, crawling with lice. And he held the line anyway. When he was finally released in March of 1513, it wasn't because they cleared his name. It was a general amnesty after a new pope was elected. They sent him into exile, to a small farm outside the city. And there's this detail about his exile that I can't stop thinking about. Every evening, he would take off his muddy work clothes, dress himself in formal robes, and walk into his study to, in his words, converse with the ancients. Broken body, ruined career, and he still put on the robes. It was there, in that disgrace, that he wrote The Prince. Not as revenge, as pure mechanics. A cold description of how power actually works when nobody's watching. Here's the forbidden knowledge most people never get told. Manipulation works on you because you're decent. You were trained to explain yourself, to seek fairness, to assume good faith. And a certain kind of person reads that training like a manual. Later in this video, I'll show you the third stage, the one that completely breaks your reality. Keep watching, because the first two exist only to set it up. Stage 1. The guilt shift. Here's how it plays out. You bring up something real, a boundary that got crossed, a behavior that hurt you. You say it calmly, reasonably, exactly the way you were taught to. And instead of addressing it, they pivot. Suddenly, you're hearing about something you did 3 months ago. Something you'd forgotten. Something that has nothing to do with what you just raised. Your valid concern just vanished. And now you're on defense, explaining yourself for a crime you didn't come here to discuss. That's the deny and attack of DARVO happening in a single move. They deny your point by never touching it, and they attack by putting you on trial instead. And this isn't rare. A 2022 study of women who had survived assault found that nearly half of them experienced this exact tactic from their perpetrator in later contact. Half. This is a documented weapon. Now here's the cognitive dissonance worth sitting with. The moment you start defending yourself against that old accusation, you have already lost. You lose the moment you accept the trade. You let them swap the topic. You handed them the remote control to your own emotions and said, "Here, point me wherever you want." The amateur takes the bait every single time. He explains. He justifies. He says, "That's not fair, and anyway, what about when you..." And now it's a shouting match with no floor and no ceiling. The Machiavellian does something else entirely. He stays silent, not sulking, not shutting down. Silent the way a wall is silent. He simply does not accept the swap. He notices the pivot, he lets it hang in the air, and he calmly returns to the original point. That's a separate conversation. I'm talking about what happened tonight. Strategic silence is armor, because a guilt shift only works if you chase it. Refuse to chase, and the whole move collapses in on itself. But watch what happens next. Because when the guilt shift fails, they don't give up. They escalate to stage 2. Stage 2, the strategic dismissal. Once they see you're off balance, or worse for them, refusing to play, they change tools. Now they come after your perception itself. You're too sensitive. You're overthinking this. You're making a huge deal out of nothing. These exact phrases show up over and over across the research, in the same order, almost word for word. That consistency should tell you something. They are deliberately recalibrating the power dynamic. Every time they call your reaction too much, they're moving the line of what's normal. They're teaching you that your instincts are defective, that your read on reality needs their approval to be valid. And here's the part that stings. People only respect what they cannot fully control. The second they can talk you out of your own feelings, they've learned you're controllable. And control kills respect. Now let me draw a hard line for you. Here's what weak men do. When they get called too sensitive, they try to prove they're not. They over-explain. They lay out their feelings in more detail, with more evidence, hoping that if they just articulate it perfectly, the other person will finally understand and validate them. That's the trap. You cannot explain your way out of a dismissal, because the dismissal was never about understanding. The more you explain, the more material you hand them to dismiss. The Machiavellian strategy is the opposite. You become unreadable. You don't defend the size of your reaction. You don't negotiate whether your feeling is allowed to exist. I've said what I think. You don't have to agree with it. That's it. No more supply, because here's the mechanism underneath their whole game. They need your reaction the way a fire needs oxygen. Your anger and tears feed it. but your desperate explaining feeds it most of all. There's actually a name for the counter-move survivors developed for this. They call it gray rocking. You become as interesting to provoke as a plain gray rock. Flat, unremarkable, nothing to grab onto. Now, I want to be responsible here because this matters. Gray rocking is a survival tactic, not a lifestyle. And the research flags something called an extinction burst. When you stop reacting, a manipulator will often escalate first. They'll push harder, get louder, get more dramatic, trying to force the old reaction back out of you. It gets worse right before it gets quiet. And if you're dealing with someone who has any history of real violence, this is not a mind game to win. That's a situation to leave. I'm talking about the psychological chess most people face. The coworker, the partner who argues dirty, the friend who rewrites every disagreement. For that fight, becoming unreadable is how you starve the fire. But starving the fire only pushes them to their final, most dangerous move. Because if they can't shift the guilt onto you and they can't dismiss your reaction, they go after the one thing you've been standing on this entire time: your grip on what actually happened. Stage 3. Manufactured self-doubt. This is the one I promised you at the start. The stage that breaks your reality. This is where they stop arguing about the issue entirely and start rewriting the history of the event itself. That never happened. You're remembering it wrong. I never said that. You always do this. And they say it with total, unshakable confidence. That confidence is the weapon. Because when someone is uncertain, you trust your own memory. But when someone contradicts you with absolute certainty, your brain starts to wonder if maybe they know something you don't. This is the reverse victim and offender of DARVO, fully executed. They've now flipped it so completely that you're the unstable one, the one who always does this. And they're the patient victim putting up with you. This is what Dr. Robin Stern, a psychoanalyst at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, called the Gaslight effect in her 2007 book. And she mapped how the victim descends through it in 3 stages of their own. First, disbelief. This can't be happening. Then, defense. You start frantically arguing your version of reality, gathering evidence, trying to prove what you know. And finally, the stage that gives it its power. Acceptance. You stop trusting your own mind. You start preemptively apologizing. You outsource the definition of reality to the person harming you. And Stern says something important about this. The victim holds the key to their own prison, which sounds cruel until you understand what she means. The entire structure depends on you needing them to agree that you're sane. It takes 2 people to keep this going. The one rewriting reality and the one still asking them to confirm it. Now, one honest caveat, because I don't want you weaponizing this word carelessly. Stern herself warns that gaslighting has become a lazy buzzword. Real gaslighting is a deliberate, sustained, repeated campaign to make you doubt your sanity. It is not your friend simply remembering a dinner differently than you. Knowing the difference is part of being unshakable. So what's the defense against stage 3? It is not arguing harder. Remember, defense is literally the second stage of your own descent. The more you fight to prove reality, the deeper into the trap you walk. The defense is emotional self-sufficiency. You become dangerous to a manipulator the exact moment you stop needing them to validate your version of events. When their certainty stops shaking yours. When that never happened gets met with a calm internal. I know what happened, and I don't require you to agree. And here is the single most important concept in this entire video. There's a gap. A gap between the moment you feel the confusion and the moment you react to it. Amateurs live with zero gap. Feeling and reaction are the same instant. They feel the doubt, and they immediately start defending, chasing, explaining. Building the gap is the whole game. Feel the confusion, notice it, name it. He's doing the certainty move right now. And then choose your response from a place of stillness instead of panic. That gap is the internal architecture Machiavelli built in a prison cell. 6 drops, and he still didn't hand them the story they wanted. They controlled his body. They never got his mind. That's the fortress. And now you can start building your own, brick by brick. Let's close every loop. The world trains you to seek approval and to explain yourself into the ground. Manipulators rely on that training completely. It's the only thing they have. The guilt shift requires you to chase the swap. The strategic dismissal relies on you over-explaining, and manufactured self-doubt depends on your need for their validation. See all three, and you've stolen their blueprint. The whole machine runs on your participation. So you stop participating. Instead of fighting or trying to out-argue them, recognize that the shouting match itself is the trap. You simply close the gates to your fortress, and you let them exhaust themselves outside the walls. The research even backs this up in the coldest way possible. Freud found that the single most effective defense against DARVO is education. Just knowing the pattern measurably drains its power, people who can name it stop blaming themselves. You just got that education. The confusion you felt at the start of this video, the apology you didn't owe, the memory you doubted. That was never proof that something was wrong with you. It was proof the tactic was working. And now it can't work the same way again. So here's what I want from you. Drop the word unshakable in the comments right now. Not as a wish, as a declaration that the gate is closed and the game is over. Subscribe because we go one level deeper every single week. The robes go on, the study door closes, and the work never stops. And neither do you.